The state provides money for child care vouchers. A judge rules against student voter ID law, and an Indiana partnership invests in Israeli startups. From the television studios at WFYI Public Media, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending April 17, 2026.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by Par Ritchie.
Indiana is poised to infuse $200 million into a state and federally funded program to help low-income working families pay for child care. Dylan Piers-McCoy reports the money would end a freeze on enrollment that has lasted more than a year.
Indiana daycares have been forced to lay off staff, cut classrooms, or even close altogether after the state slashed funding for child care vouchers. Governor Mike Braun announced that he will ask the State Budget Committee to spend $200 million to pay for new vouchers.
This investment allows us to reopen access after 15 months of frozen admissions and puts us on a good, sustainable path forward.
The money is expected to pay for vouchers for about 14,000 children currently on the wait list.
So is this going to move the needle on the state's child care gap? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Ann DeLaney. Republican Mike O'Brien. John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief at Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Jill Sheridan, managing editor at WFYI. So, Ann, is this funding maybe too little too late?
Well, it's little. I mean, after the Republicans cut the program, the waiting list grew to 35,000 families. Okay, we're supposedly going to take 14,000 off. But the bigger problem, it seems to me, is the uncertainty of it. I mean, they've lowered the compensation to the providers, and there are providers that are saying they can't make it work with the amount of money they're receiving, number one. And number two, how do you plan? How do you hire people, rent a facility, get it all set up if from year to year we can't make up our mind whether we're supporting child care or not? I mean, we want everybody to work. We put all these work requirements on people receiving Medicaid and things like that, and then we make it as difficult as we can for them to do it. You know, a regular family earning $15 an hour as a full-time employment, as frankly many state employees are doing, cannot afford $300 a week for child care. Can't. And that's with one child. If they have two, forget it. So either we're committed to providing quality child care which prepares these children for school, or we're not. And we're obviously not. I mean, this is a little bit, it does move the needle just ever so slightly, but it doesn't fix the problem.
I mean, the problem is, you know, ongoing here in the state, and something that we've been dealing with now for a year as the state did cut off those vouchers. This is a temporary fix, and we're betting on whether or not, you know, there will be long-term solutions to this problem.
Well, one, I think it's great that they're clearing half the waiting list. I don't think it's
half.
It's 14,000 out of 35,000. So I guess it's
35%.
You know,
Not half.
2/7. I don't know.
Something like that. Yeah.
Let's not do math.
But
just
make the
accurate.
important. Thank you for fact checking me. But no, look, I think the legislature has, I think the Republicans and the business community have never been more focused on child care. I think this part of the problem with funding this is that when you got to be really intentional before you fund a long-term program, because Ann's right, you can't just go stand up a child care network and then go, just kidding, the funding's gone, and then 311 of the facilities close. And then you go, oh, never mind, it's back on. And they're like, well, we all went, all those people went and they're doing something else in life, right? This is like, you got to be really intentional when you set these things up, no matter what it is, whether it's child care or anything else, the government's going to support. So I do think we are entering a period. The Republicans have been talking about this in the legislature for a number of years now. I think the business community has recognized how important it is for workforce. It's not a lot of money to go clear the whole waiting list. It's $450 million to go clear the waiting list.
But not
permanently, and then forever.
Not at the rate they're compensating the providers.
No, that's right. But if you're going to make a commitment to restart part of this industry, and the state's going to support it, it's got to support it forever. Because when it doesn't, you see what happens. All these facilities close. All these people go off in life and do different things. The churches don't have the churches that are supporting these child care programs don't have you can't take their money away and they just go, never mind, we'll just pay for it out of the plate. Right. You know, they just can't do it. So yeah, I hope, you know, double down on this, get to the budget session and hopefully fully fund it so we can clear the waiting list and make a real commitment to it.
And the Budget Committee yesterday did approve this money, and we did hear Braun up to this point talking about, you know, that this was going to be a focus for him. Was this a bit of a surprise to you, Niki?
Yeah, the state budget director made clear yesterday that the governor is, you know, supportive of continuing this into the next biennium. It'll be a big priority in his budget. One interesting thing about the 35,000 on the wait list is we don't technically know if all those people are eligible. So, you know, because they're sitting on a wait list, we're not spending time and effort to go ahead and to like determine
how many people didn't bother to sign up because the list is so long.
Right. So hopefully we'll get a better idea when they start pulling people off the wait list, how many of those are actually eligible. And I did really like how they are prioritizing some of the seats. For instance, adoption and foster children, for kids in the CHIN system, for children of child care workers. So I thought that was a good move, too.
And Ann mentioned, John, the reimbursement rates, which are, you know, not going to be tracking the same as they used to. Will that be a concern as we're moving into the future and trying to still solve this crisis?
It's going to be with us a while, I think, this crisis. There's no easy fix. Even we talk about, what did you say, 450 million would be a fix. That's a steep hill to climb when you look at a state budget, what it is over a biennium. States have tackled this. The most notable, New Mexico, last November became the first state with a fully universal, didn't matter what your family income was, you were going to have child care. And that was done with a multi-billion-dollar trust fund set up, supported by, I think, upwards of 70% of the residents of the state. And I think they see it as a competitive advantage, which it probably is. And we talk so much at the administration level in the State House with Economic Development Corporation about we want to always be attractive and have the greatest appeal for a number of companies that might come here and create jobs or open new facilities. We have a tax structure based on attracting people and being competitive. We try to provide infrastructure and so forth, and the tech facilities that are conducive to that. Eventually, as more and more states, I think, adopt this approach, you see New York City, you see versions of this with Vermont, with New Hampshire, California, and even some Republican-dominated states. Texas is looking at how they can do this too. Eventually, this state, if it wants to be competitive in terms of economic development and a workforce, will have to find a way to make sure that those who want to work in our workforce and be gainfully employed, contributing members of society have sort of that backstop for their families and the care that's given. In the meantime, though, with federal funding uncertainty, everything we talked about is if federal funding stays the same. Right. I don't think we can make that bet. So,
and with that federal
so much uncertainty.
Funding, and we were able to build up a lot of the facilities that we had here in the state, and now some of those facilities are struggling. Will the infrastructure still be there for us?
It's anyone's guess whether the infrastructure will still be there. It has not been a Republican priority, either on the federal level or on the state level, and it has to be, and it will take years to make up the damage that they've done by cutting it as drastically as they did in 2024-25.
Do you think that we will be in a good shape if we do continue to long-term fund child care in the state of Indiana?
I think we have to. I think there are Republicans who disagree and have deprioritized it, but there are Republicans in the legislature who have prioritized it. I think we're going to see in the 27 budget session that it's going to be a priority.
We'll see. Time now for viewer feedback. Every week we pose an unscientific online poll question. This week's question: will this funding help ease the child care crisis facing some Hoosier families? Vote yes or no. The last question posed to viewers: should the state extend the gas sales tax exemption beyond the 30 days? 61% saying yes and 39% answering no. If you would like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. A federal judge has blocked Indiana's ban on using state IDs to vote. Ben Thorpe reports federal judge called the ban an unconstitutional burden, granting voter advocacy groups a preliminary injunction.
Voter advocacy groups and an Indiana University student sued the state last year following the passage of legislation that blocked the use of student IDs in voting on the grounds that it didn't prove someone was an Indiana resident. In his decision, Judge Richard Young disagreed with Indiana lawmakers, writing, quote, "There is no evidence that student IDs have been used to engage in voter fraud or any other voting-related misconduct." A spokesperson for one of the voter advocacy groups behind the case celebrated the decision. In a statement, Attorney General Todd Rokita said he will appeal the judge's decision.
So, Mike, what does this mean for election security in Indiana?
Nothing. But look, I've always supported voter ID. Showing your ID at the polling place, I never thought was an undue burden. No more than it's an undue burden to show it at the grocery store or the airport. But think about the problem you're trying to solve too. Let's presume someone appears at the polling place, Mike O'Brien, they find me in the polling book, my signature matches, I show them my student ID, yep, that's me. Photo matches, I go and vote, we later find out that I shouldn't have been in there. The problem isn't the student ID. The problem is, how did I get in there? There's a failure at the BMV. There's a failure at the county clerk's office. There's a failure at the Secretary of State's office. That's the problem you have to solve for. It's not the I showed up and showed my student ID and illegally voted, but my name was in the system and I signed my signature. I matched the signature and the photo matched, and I went to all this effort to illegally vote. That's the problem you're trying to solve to is the security of the voter list. That's got to be the priority. It's not the I showed my ID at the polling place, because everything else matched. The fraud started if I showed up in the voter list. The fraud started way before I showed a student ID at the polling place. Right. But I also don't think that's a problem, because I think we do have a secure voting list, and I do think that we don't have voter fraud in Indiana. Because I think I've been in the basement of county clerk's offices for 100 elections and I've been in polling places. I've watched all this happen. I've watched the counting of votes and the volunteers in that process and all of the secret, the chain of events that need to happen to secure an election. That is a substantial process, and it is secure, and we should be proud of that, because we had Connie Lawson and Todd Rokita and others who made sure it was secure and created processes to make sure it was secure. And now we're just pulling the rug out from under it because someone showed a student ID instead of a driver's license, and it's like, if that's happening, we're missing the point. Right. Like, it's the system that's fraudulent.
Why target the students in the first place then with this law?
Because they're afraid they're going to vote Democratic. But the real problem, that was a very good positive explanation for what has nothing to do with voter security, nothing to do with voter fraud.
Thank you.
All it has to do,
appreciate that.
Yeah, it was very creative. All it has to do is
also accurate.
Suppressing the vote. That's all it's about. That's why we try to contract the difficulty in voting absentee or voting by mail or having the hours convenient or the locations convenient. All of that is designed to keep us at the bottom of turnout in all the 50 states. And the Republicans have been unceasingly at odds with making voting accessible for years. And this is just one more wrinkle, because that ID is as good as the driver's license in terms of proving who you are and your ability to vote, and we want to restrict it. And that just perfectly encapsulates the Republican approach. It has nothing to do with voter security. It has to do with voter suppression.
Maybe I've been kept out of that room because they know I'm going to disagree with it. But I've never been in a room where we've run elections or run a campaign where there's ever been a conversation about how do we make sure people don't vote. We go to
That's because it occurs in the legislative caucus and you're not invited.
We go to extreme efforts as campaigns to get people from their couch to the polling place.
Your people, only your people.
Well, you do the same thing, of course.
Only your people.
Actually, if you go back to the RNC, Indiana, of course, was one of the first states, if not the first state in the country, to require this. It went to the Supreme Court and was litigated. Yeah, of course, yeah. There was, because we could give me a half hour and a computer, we can have the documents where the RNC and task forces within the RNC nationally, granted, this was not Indiana. Yes,
make sure
where this was part of the strategy. Voter suppression was a strategy. I mean, let's not quibble about that. That's clearly...
Don't quibble.
Well, Niki, I mean, the students, I can imagine, have pretty low turnout for voting anyway. And does this just create more of questioning, mass, a bit of chaos as students might be wanting to head to the polls in 2 weeks?
I mean, anytime you're doing injunctions while voting is going on is not the greatest. But the fact is that when this was pushed forward, the inference on the floor in various committees was that somehow these people shouldn't be eligible to vote, that they could be voting in their home state and they could, you know, they don't live here. But we have voter registration laws. You have to show certain IDs. You have to show your utility bills and like that. You know what I mean? Right. And so it was never like about the voter ID. It was just a quicker way to get at it than the voter registration stuff.
Well, it would be.
And it's not a negligible issue. I think your organization reported that if you look at Monroe County and the IU campus is a specific example where election officials said that of the students who voted at polling places on the IU campus in the 2024 cycle, 2/3 of those individuals used student ID. So that, presumably, that wasn't just the first card they came to in their wallets or their purses. That's what they had, and that's what they used.
The judge estimated at least 40,000 students are impacted. Could be as high as 90.
Yeah, I heard that. Well, Indiana Economic Development Corporation also this week announced a $60 million partnership aimed at bringing Israeli tech startups to Indiana. As Ben Thorpe reports, the initiative aims to integrate Israeli startups with Indiana universities, healthcare systems, and companies.
Indiana will commit $15 million to the initiative, with the Iron Nation partnership expected to invest another $30 million. Iron Nation is a platform that launched in the wake of the October 7th attacks in Israel and is aimed at producing investment in Israeli startups. Indiana is committed to competing and winning in the industries shaping the future, Governor Mike Braun said in a press release. The partnership strengthens the relationship between Indiana and Israel. The state has been purchasing Israeli bonds at a time when activists have called for a divestment in the country, given the ongoing conflict in Palestine. Indiana State Treasurer has said those bonds are some of the state's best performing investments.
This has gotten quite a bit of chatter this week. Is this a good investment for the state?
I mean, eye of the beholder, right? And also, this is going to take time for us to see if they can lure some companies here and bring some jobs here. There's a lot of discussion of it at yesterday's State Budget Committee, really hoping for some more information on return on investment, that kind of thing. But anytime you prioritize tax credits or economic development money, I mean, it's nothing that you can say right away is going to work or not. So we'll have to see how it does maybe a year from now and if we're making any progress.
A lot of that chatter, John, we're hearing, about why not invest in Indiana startups and startups here at home.
Well, and presumably, I'm not speaking for IEDC, but I guess the idea is through this collaboration and partnership, it will benefit Indiana significantly as well. And we'll have to see. I think IEDC needs a win, and if this delivers, great. But it is not without controversy, given the geopolitics, the backdrop against which this is taking place. Now, I was curious, the portfolio, was it all military? Because the notion of Iron Nation, and it came after the attacks across the border. But actually, I see it has to do with business operations and logistics and medicine. And so maybe there would be wisdom in pointing out that we're not just building the next set of laser-guided bombs or something, which could contribute, presumably, to the tension that's already there as we eye strife in the Middle East.
Right. Is this timing ill?
No, I mean, Niki's right. This is very vague, and it's really not, in terms of the IEDC, a very large investment. So, just let's wait and see if it produces anything.
With the war going on right now in the United States, being involved in the war with Israeli, we are hearing a lot of people commenting on that as well, and the timing of this investment.
Yeah, I mean, it's front of everyone's mind. So the geopolitical comment was correct, and that's the backdrop. I think the big positive for me is IEDC hasn't really had a public strategy since Eric Holcomb left office. I mean, that was the IEDC was the driving agency of his administration. It was very high profile. There was criticism that why aren't we investing more in Indiana when the governor's in Italy and all these other places trying to attract foreign investment. But that's what it's supposed to do, and it has not had a public-facing plan, really, like the previous administration had, and that was in part because they were doing, the Braun administration was doing good due diligence on the legislature is pumping a lot of money in there. They're starting to ask questions about where it's going, and so they spent time, as they appropriately should have, of kicking the tires on where are we spending all this money. So they've done that, and they've done what they needed to do. But now it's nice that it looks like they are starting to restart the car here at the IEDC and actually make it the economic development engine that it was, where it was breaking investment records and jobs records and income, individual income records, household income records, with the jobs that they were bringing in. So it's good to see it's getting back to that.
I mean, the IEDC also focusing now on, a lot of bioscience, a lot of biotechnology, life science industries. But as you mentioned, this seems separate from that.
Well, potentially it seems separate. Again, that's why I was comforted by a portfolio that does seem pretty broad. I don't think it's devoid of the biosciences and the medical biotechnology that has been served as, by design, as the backbone of economic development in that for the state of Indiana. So it's just, these issues are fraught. I mean, I'm sure at some point, because of the geopolitics, those issues, it's not happening in a vacuum, state the obvious.
Nothing ever does.
Yeah.
We also heard, though, as well with the story this week, Niki, about the Israeli bonds, which the state has invested in the past, and how those bonds are very well performing, and again, investing in the country. Does it make financial sense?
Look, I don't have the expertise on whether that makes financial sense. I mean, they clearly, the politics behind the world affairs is pushing either these Israeli startup techs or the Israeli bonds, and they're wanting to show,
that's always been the case.
Support for Israel, and we'll just have to see how it goes.
Okay. Well, the Indiana Department of Natural Resources proposes a quota increase for bobcat hunting and trapping. Animal welfare advocates say that could lead to the animal's extinction in the state. Samantha Horton reports.
Last year, Indiana, for the first time since 1969, set the statewide bobcat trapping quota at 250. People reached the number within a month. Now the state is looking to expand the quota to 400 and allow people to hunt and kill bobcats with weapons instead of just traps. But Indiana Director of Humane World for Animals Samantha Chapman says the state's support of and increasing the killing of bobcats is both concerning and irresponsible.
With those increased hunting and trapping quotas, we really could see an imbalance of wildlife.
Public comment is open through May 19th.
So, John, is the state acting too quickly on this rule?
Well, let me just say, the older I get, the less appetite I have for killing anything with legs and a face. Yeah, I mean, they all look like my puppy. Everything, I don't even like kill bugs anymore. And there's no bobcat quota on
cockroaches.
Well, where do you think I live? Come on, they're not cockroaches. But butterflies and those kinds of things. But one does wonder why there is the haste here. As I understand it, these rules in the past, and of course we've never had weapon-based elimination before. It's always been traps and so forth to help control the population. But this is a change not only in the numbers that can be taken, but also in the means that can be employed to claim their lives and thin the population. And in the past, that would have gone to the 12-member Natural Resources Commission, where people, I think, of all partisan stripes and expertise can weigh in. That's not being done here. And even if they were, and there is a public comment period, but one wonders again at how much heed is being paid to that. I think there were upwards of 3,000 comments when the current system was employed, overwhelmingly negative and against it, but sort of like a ballroom in Washington, D.C., or you can have people that are overwhelmingly against something, I mean, like 99 to 1, and the committees sometimes see fit to ignore it. So too bad they didn't stick with the protocol that would have addressed at least some concerns here.
Yeah, and you had Purdue studying the bobcats and trapping them and studying them for that purpose to determine exactly what the rules should be. And I don't think either Purdue or groups like the Sierra Club or any of those groups concerned about this were consulted before this was enacted. There's no rush. Okay, I mean, there allegedly are some people down in Du Bois County that are mad that turkeys are getting eliminated, but I haven't seen any proof of that.
Who used to be a turkey farmer in Du Bois County? That's a setup for you.
Not me.
The governor.
The governor.
That just
that
maybe a little softball. And since you brought up colleges, I should just point out her college mascot is Bobcats. If they wanted to come and kill Hoosiers or Boilermakers,
we ought to know what we're doing before we do it.
We really don't know exactly how many animals are in the state.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's hard to do. And I will say I am a Bobcat. But to me, the more interesting part is the in the weeds part, which is that the Governor Braun's administration is now completely going around the Natural Resources Commission. They are putting forward rules without consultation of them and basically just kind of blocking them. During session, they tried to get rid of the Natural Resources Commission, and lawmakers said, no, you're still going to have it. And now they've said, okay, we've figured out a way that we're just going to.
Just why would we worry about science? I mean, what does that have to do with anything?
I was pretty upset when they did the same thing with the otters, a number of years ago with an endangered species.
We're killing otters.
We're killing otters, too. But unfortunately, that's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel has been Democrat Ann DeLaney, Republican Mike O'Brien, John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief at Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Jill Sheridan, managing editor at WFYI. Join us next time because a lot can happen in an Indiana Week. The views expressed are solely those of the panelists.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by Par Ritchie.